Hello, and welcome to the Maryland Symphony Orchestra's Musician Studio. Where we get to learn a little bit more about the musicians that help to create our season. And tonight, we're going to be joined by a very special guest, composer, Dr. James Lee III. He's a professor of composition and theory at Morgan State University, and we will be performing a world premiere performance of his Second Symphony on February 13th at 3 p.m. on our virtual streaming platform, which can be located through our website, marylandsymphony.org, or just go directly to watch.marylandsymphony.org. It's a virtual performance, so anybody could tune in. It'll also be available for replay for 7 days following the event. And we have gotten to know Dr. Lee over the seasons, but specifically last season, we performed his first symphony. Was supposed to be his second symphony last season, but for reasons of pandemic adjustments, we did his first symphony, which was a little bit smaller, for strings only. And this February, we will finally get to premiere his second symphony, which is always an exciting opportunity for an orchestra. Dr. Lee, as I said, professor of composition and theory at Morgan State University, and we're going to ask him to share with us a little bit about his career and his musical journey. And so I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. James Lee III. Dr. Lee, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us here in the Musicians Studio.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Before we start, I just want to say that at the Maryland Symphony, our hearts go out to you and your colleagues and your students at Morgan State University today, and in this with this terrible disruption and trauma. And we're thinking about you and that your whole community right now.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
We would love to learn more. What's behind the composer? What's behind beyond the bio? You have an extensive bio on your website, which is wonderful. Tremendous list of accomplishments, but each of us as artists and musicians are sort of shaped by our earliest experiences and exposure to music. And I think that's where I'd like to ask you to start for us today.
Okay, well, if I go way back, my parents told me that they actually played music for me when I was still in the womb. So they would play, especially classical music. So I'm from Southwest Michigan, and I went to a high school that's called Andrews Academy in Berrien Springs, Michigan. And that is part of Andrews University in Berrien Springs. And they have a radio station called WAUS that plays a lot of classical music. So they would play that particular station for me. And I apparently, when I was in the womb, I kind of absorbed that over time. And then it wasn't until much later that I actually started piano lessons. So my father wanted me to study piano when I was 6 years old, but then like the other boys, I wanted to play the sports, playing baseball and basketball and football. So all of those sports were my interest early on. And then at age 6, he wanted me to take guitar lessons or pursue guitar and piano. But then I decided, I didn't want to continue that. Even start that. So it wasn't until I was 12. And one day my father just returned home and told me, oh, by the way, I registered you for piano lessons and you'll be taking piano lessons this year. And at the beginning, I wasn't too excited about that. When in school, elementary school, having friends who are probably not the best influences aren't really as a positive. I don't have necessarily a positive experience when you're in school with those type of children. So I remember when the music teacher would come on whatever day of the week it was, I forgot, the other students would really be disrespectful. And then I would kind of join in with them and not think that it was important, like music. That's not really an important subject. So it's funny that after all these years, how involved I am with music and working as a composer and professor, when back then I didn't take it as seriously, like in probably the 6th grade or so. But one piece really stuck out to me, and that was the Bach Prelude and Fugue in G minor, or the Little Fugue in G minor. That one piece that the teacher played really, for whatever reason, resonated with me so many years ago.
It's a gem of a piece. I mean, it has been transcribed so many times, and so even a brass player like me has played it. And yeah, it's such, perfection. In, I suppose, even at a young age, you recognize what a special quality that piece had. I'm sure.
Certainly. I mean, that was one piece, and then I ended up attending orchestral concerts in the St. Joseph area and Benton Harbor and Berrien Springs. And I remember one, I don't even remember if he was a music teacher, but I remember him giving me a cassette tape of the Robert Schumann piano concerto that the local university orchestra performed. But then he ran out of tape. So it was not until like sometime afterwards I finally found out how the last movement ended of that concerto.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, our we're a similar generation, I imagine. Our access was not nearly as robust as it is today. I think children today are incredibly fortunate that they have so much at their fingertips, but yet what we did have made a huge impact. And I think that's fascinating to hear about, especially your parents playing classical music and you hearing it in the womb. And I chuckle about that, but that's not a idea to be dismissed. That would have an impact on you. I think not much else to listen to except your mother's heartbeat, I think. Right. So, wow, that's really very interesting. So you attended University of Michigan. Was that for your entire educational? I mean, your undergraduate and graduate education?
Well, I finished at the University of Michigan. I started at Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, as a piano performance major.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't until in my sophomore year, 2 of my friends were leaving and transferring to other schools. And I thought, if I'm going to continue to work on Beethoven sonatas and Chopin etudes, I needed to really have the time to do that. And at that time, I was accompanying a lot. So I would be accompanying singers and playing violin sonatas, violin and piano sonatas. So I decided to apply to the University of Michigan. And I didn't even know how great of a program that it had, or that it has, until after I was admitted and I had been there for like a few months. Then I realized how fortunate I was to be able to be in a program like that. So I finished my bachelor's there. And then I applied to Peabody, the Peabody Conservatory and the University of Maryland, when I thought I was going to be this wonderful concert pianist. And I was accepted into the program. But then I decided near the end of my bachelor's at Michigan that I would pursue composition instead. I thought, I can't see myself winning these great competitions and really having the kind of career that I would like to have. So I decided to choose something even more difficult and pursue composition.
Yeah, certainly. Do you still have an opportunity to play other than, I'm sure you compose at the piano, I guess.
Sometimes. It's funny. I have a Kawai baby grand piano upstairs, but I don't have as much time to really play it. I perform very rarely. The last time I seriously performed something of mine was in London with a soprano. I premiered a soprano and piano version of a song cycle, which exists firstly as a soprano, cello, and piano version. And we couldn't get Sheku Mason Kenne in London. He'd be so much out of our reach to really pursue that option. So we decided to play the soprano and the piano version. But that was in 2019.
Oh, that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. And again, something new for me to learn about you that wasn't apparent, but that you were a collaborative pianist. And I say that because, there are many really fine pianists and people who aspire to be soloists. That's one approach to piano, and there are some superstars on piano who do that. I think it takes a special quality of musicianship and collaboration to be a collaborative pianist, to accompany, to play chamber music, to work with a violinist, and to work with different people, a singer one time, a violinist another time, with different repertoire and different techniques, and that's really interesting to me, because I love chamber music and I love that interaction and collaboration. Wow.
Sure.
Tell us then about turning this into a career as a composer. I mean, you said, an even more challenging pursuit, perhaps, and that's probably because pianists, the career track is you do competitions, you win a competition, you get bookings, you get an agent. But yeah, most composers don't have an agent. It's like, it's up to you. You want a website, you got to get out there and make your website. You don't usually have a publicist, and there's a certain amount of self promotion you have to do if you want to share your music.
Yes, I did. I had a lot of practice with networking and really trying to promote myself as a student. I remember thinking towards the end of my program, well, when I graduate, who will actually play my music? That was, a big concern that I had. I was studying in the master's program, and then I thought that I would probably need more time to train and to, gain more experience as a composer, studying at Michigan. So when I was completing my second year of the master's program, I applied to the DMA program there. And then I spent the next 4 years learning from Bright Chang and William Bolcom and Michael Doherty, who was my last teacher. And I was really fortunate because I remember at one point that Michael Doherty was leading our composition seminar in the spring of, I think it was 2004. And William Bolcom had this gargantuan work. The work was or is Songs of Innocence and Experience for chorus and orchestra and soloists, and it's very eclectic. It has all these influences combined into this 3-hour work. And Leonard Slatkin came from Washington, and he did a seminar with us in the composition seminar course. And then he also conducted this piece by William Bolcom. And I remember thinking about their friendship and how their collaboration was. So when I was already here in Maryland, I went to I attended a National Symphony concert at the Kennedy Center. And I remember thinking it'd be wonderful if perhaps Leonard Slatkin would even consider playing the first movement of my orchestral dissertation piece from Michigan. The whole piece is about 14 minutes long. And I thought, well, maybe if he can only play the first movement, which is a little over 3 minutes long. So anyway, I emailed William Bolcom, and William Bolcom gave me a nice little recommendation, I suppose. He didn't actually give me the contact information for Leonard Slatkin, but he contacted him, and his secretary told me, well, he is going to be in Europe, in Germany, conducting. So perhaps we can either set up a meeting with you and him either the last week of February or the last week of March. And I decided February. And I was so fortunate that I did that because I met him on a Tuesday. I showed him the score, and he went through the score and looked at it. And then in the course of the conversation, he asked me how could he get the parts extracted. So then I began to, be encouraged that maybe he'll at least read through it or play through it at some point. And he invited me to attend a Thursday concert the same week of Joseph Swatner's new piece at the Kennedy Center. So once I attended the concert, and I went backstage to talk with Leonard Slatkin and to greet Joseph Swatner and to meet him, he said, oh, by the way, we're doing your piece next season. So, and this was like, like pre-COVID when they were announcing the seasons much earlier. So he actually introduced me to the president of I guess the Kennedy Center of the orchestra at the time. And then I was told not to mention it quite yet because it would be released in the Washington Post the very next week.
Wow.
So I think what he did is I think he probably substituted my piece for something he already had planned and just changed the program at the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, clearly, I mean, Leonard Slatkin, very, tremendous conductor and very discerning. And he, I'm sure, identified very quickly what an opportunity that would be for the NSO. But what a great opportunity for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And so much. We owe so much to those who mentor us and welcome, giving you a little bit of a hand up. Uh, that's a thrilling story. I was just going to ask you sort of to share with us, and maybe that's the story. But what performance might have been the sort of the pivotal moment when you thought, okay, I'm going to be a composer. People are going to hear my music.
Yeah, I think it was in 2008 when, well, in 2006 at the last concert, Leonard Slatkin told me that he wanted to keep tabs on me, keep up with what I'm doing, of course. So I told him in the summer of 2007 that I wanted to write a piece based off my grandfather in World War II. And he was really interested in the idea. And he told me, well, I think I can get a nice high profile performance of the piece. So it turns out that when he moved to the Detroit Symphony, he programmed it on his first concerts as the new music director there.
Oh, wow.
And Carmina Burana was also programmed on that concert. And it was 4 nights. And it was a very, very enthusiastic and warm applause and reception of the piece. So at that point in 2008, I thought that I probably can continue working as a composer.
Yeah, what an honor, and so great to be able to do it, in Detroit, so close to where you studied at Michigan, just an hour and a half or something, right? It's an hour away from Ann Arbor.
Yeah, about 45 minutes or so.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Wow, that's really, really terrific. Now, do you have it? We know you've completed your second symphony because we've got the parts, and we're going to be playing it February 13th. But do you have some other projects going on right now that are exciting for you?
I do. I have a piece. I don't know if I can. I guess I probably cannot say the orchestra. They haven't really announced their season, but
Okay.
I have 3 orchestra pieces. One of them is for chorus and orchestra, and I have never written a piece that's this extensive. About 25 minutes it will be for chorus and orchestra. So that's one work. And then another orchestra piece based on American Indian heritage. I've been doing some interesting studies on American Indians. And there's this one mega city in Illinois that's close to St. Louis, and it's called Cahokia. And I'll be writing a piece based off that history. And it kind of goes along with some recent works of mine. I have a flute concerto called Niji Memories that was premiered by the Columbia Orchestra just last October, and Julietta Currington was the soloist. And then a new piece that the Detroit Symphony premiered and commissioned that's called American, that's based off these emblems that I saw of these Black Indians, actually, that I found online and then confirmed at the British Museum back in 2019 when I was there. So that's one piece. And then this next work is a continuation on those ideas called Cahokia. And then a string quartet that I have. And then the following season, I have a piano concerto that I'll be writing, and I think an English horn concerto.
I think one of the fascinating things for me about your music is how you draw your inspiration from so many historical events and circumstances and peoples, especially stories that sort of need to be told, stories that are not well known stories, but are important stories, and that seems to form the basis or your inspiration. I should say that this premiere that we're doing, which you're going to get to talk about with Elizabeth later,
Mhm.
with for our Prelude discussion, which will be available on our Facebook page and everywhere coming up soon. But so we won't get into that a lot. But it is actually a co-commission work. We are a two orchestra commission team here with the Hopkins Orchestra, and we were both scheduled to do it in 2020, and things interrupted us, and we were not able to do it until now. But wanted to also acknowledge Hopkins for their commitment to this piece, and hope that they will also be able to perform it soon. Can I ask you about your creative process? With it sounds like first it might be research, or like you're always researching these historical circumstances, looking for inspiration. But then I have no idea because I'm not a composer. I'm just a performer. But how do those first few notes go on the page?
So I used to improvise at the piano and play, and now I don't do it as much. I find that I end up spending more time than I might like. And now that I have more commissions at a time to work with and teaching, my time, I have to be really careful how I budget my time. So um, before I even write anything, I pray before. As a Christian, I usually pray about what I'm writing, and I find that some pieces, I'm amazed in how it comes out, because I'm thinking, wow, I after having prayed and being inspired and working on the music, I tend to think about where events should happen in the music. So I will write like a sketch of this series of events, almost like if I'm thinking about a film score or something, and I'll write a graph, just kind of sketching out what I want. And then I'll think about the harmonic language that I would like. I'm always thinking about this kind of evocative sounds that I want to produce in certain areas, and then how the rhythmic drive will continue. Like some of my favorite composers for that kind of exotic sound are Takemitsu, and I like the rhythmic drive of Hinastera, or some of what John Adams has done. So these things, and thinking about what I want to do, I would try to derive the melodies from the harmonies. So I'll have the vertical harmonic structure, and then I'll write a melody from that.
Very, very interesting. A question here that's been shared with us. Let me relate. Is there a specific instrument or group of instruments that you like to feature in your compositions?
Well, most of the time I'm writing for orchestra. Like if anyone were to look at my output and see what's actually being performed, they'll notice that it's overwhelmingly orchestral music. So within orchestral music, of course, writing for the string section is always wonderful and inspiring. But I love to highlight these individual voices in the woodwind section, this kind of bubbling over. I kind of have this sound I like to produce in the woodwinds, as if one is looking at some boiling water, and they can kind of see the instruments coming from nothing, really, from the lower registers, and then they just kind of spring up and sing and then be present and then kind of disappear while the next instrument is actually coming to the forefront. So that's one thing. And I like featuring a suspended cymbal along with wind chimes, giving this kind of also this otherworldly kind of idea.
Wonderful.
This wind or breath, almost like a wind or breath.
Percussion always seems to be a great variable for composers, contemporary composers especially, because you can really change the whole character, the sound of an orchestra, and the percussion section is the one section where almost anything goes. If you've ever been close to an orchestra playing music of the 20th and 21st centuries, you probably maybe you've seen things back there like car parts. I've even seen airplane parts, literally like half a wing. Do you like to kind of invent instruments or play with the percussion?
I haven't gone that far in terms of inventing instruments or playing with them. I think the farthest I've gone is to use these kind of I think they were called super balls or something. I forgot what it was, the exact name of it, but I saw it on YouTube once, and you would rub it against these against the thunder sheet, and it would kind of give this kind of this sound that you might hear in a science fiction movie or something. And I remember the premiere, this was for Sukkot, the Orion's Nebula, and I remember the percussionists in Miami at the New World Symphony, they were all over Miami looking for these kind of super balls for the mallets to actually produce the sound that I wanted. So it worked okay, but you know, I have the best that I've actually ever heard this produced was at the Boston Symphony. The Boston Symphony in 2019. That was the best. I had to go after the rehearsal. I went straight to the percussionist and I told him, you know, this is the first time I actually heard it really projecting like I imagined it initially.
Well, percussionists love those. I think those adventures, like being called upon to create a new sound with a new device. I think most of them sort of pride themselves on that. I have another question that's been posed for you. What advice would you have for students who are interested in beginning in composition or beginning to compose?
Okay, so one advice I would always say to make sure that your theory knowledge is very, very good. Like if you have a really good command on all of your scales and harmony, rhythm is very, very important. Of course, as a 21st century composer, you're not necessarily going to follow all the conventions that you might hear in classical music, but at least if you can have a really good understanding of the theoretical aspects, the theory of music. And then I think if you're listening to all different types of music or even within classical music, if you're familiar with the works of many different composers, I think that can kind of help you know at least what are the possibilities depending on what instrument you're writing for, but really to kind of absorb a lot of music as much as you can and to make sure that the theory, you really understand how to write, how to notate, and how to try to be clear in your notation for your potential players.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it's, you know, part of being a musician and becoming a professional musician that and studying music that isn't obvious to people. It's those 8 a.m. You know, music theory classes that everybody takes. Everybody has to take a certain amount of that, and composition students more than others. But music is a language, and you really can't learn a language without you know, studying vocabulary and sentence structure and syntax. And you know, you can't become a great poet or prose writer without learning that part of the language. So that's great advice. And we're certainly encouraging folks to share their questions. They will be they'll pop up here if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Either way, just type a question in and we will try to get to it. Is there a theory convention that is a must learn that but not necessarily a must use? Oh, that's an interesting question. Is there a theory convention that is a must learn but not necessarily a must use when composing? Maybe there's several.
Yeah, I mean, I think besides the regular major and minor scales, I think if one were to learn the diatonic modes, that would be something that could be of interest to the composition, especially for someone who's beginning writing. And then perhaps even studying some of the other types of scales like octatonic scales, whole tone scales, and looking at sets like pitch class sets. That is something I think is really important. So you kind of understand, like if you're looking at a piece by Bartok and kind of understand if he has like these pitch class sets of 5 notes, or a piece by Ravel. I was just looking at something in my class that I was teaching yesterday where he has this kind of polytonality happening with a flute, soprano, piano, and cello. So I think if one kind of goes beyond the regular 19th century or 18th century counterpoint and learning those extended harmonic structures, I think that can always be a plus. Or even studying polytonality, I think that's very useful.
What are some composers who are on your playlist these days? I mean, what do you listen to for inspiration? What do you listen to for pleasure?
I think it's almost the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have. It's fun. I don't know if I have as much time. What am I listening to? Well, I went and took a walk today, and I was listening to Esa-Pekka Salonin's violin concerto.
Mm.
Usually, I'm listening to something that can kind of help me get inspired for something I need to do. So most of the time, I'm listening to. Well, I shouldn't say. I would say classical music, but not like the 18th century. One thing I've been going through lately are the Beethoven symphonies, and then if I'm listening to something like Beethoven 4, Beethoven 3 and 4, and then Shostakovich 7, like I said, Takemitsu, some of my own teachers, I would look at or listen to some of those works. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I've been listening to lately? Because I've been writing so much and teaching, I haven't had as much time to really listen like I would like to.
Do you find you need also some quiet time, some no music time for, just to clear the mind and clear the palate?
I do. I was talking to Michael Doherty once, and he was telling me about the times of night he would compose. And I find that there's so many distractions or needs in the day or emails, etc., that when I'm not teaching, I can be productive in the day, but I think I'm even more productive at nighttime when offices have closed and the needs of students may not be as apparent in terms of emails during the day. So I think I'm probably late afternoon and nighttime, I'm more productive.
Well, that makes sense and explains why one time when I was living in Hawaii and we had commissioned a composer in New York, that he would call me. It would be 10 o'clock in Hawaii, it'd be 4 a.m. in New York, and he'd be working on the piece.
Wow.
Now I understand. I get it. Of course, in the middle of the night, when there's there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, no distractions. What about as far as listening music that not classical music? What do you enjoy? Artists that you enjoy listening to, or genres you enjoy?
I've been listening to some Brazilian music. My wife is Brazilian, so I'll listen to the Brazilian music because of the rhythms. I used to listen to Michael Jackson back when I was like in the 7th grade or so. But once I started piano lessons, I pretty much never listened to popular music anymore. So once that happened, I just hadn't had an interest in it anymore. So that's
Right.
it's hard. I mean, of course, if I'm listening to something choral, I love choral music or sacred choral music, but it feels like I'm always working. If I'm not watching music, then I'm pretty interested in like European soccer leagues.
Really? All right. And who's your team?
Oh, right now it's PSG, Paris Saint-Germain.
All right. Have you also checked out the TV series Ted Lasso?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet. But I have heard of it.
It's very enjoyable. I've gotten a big kick out of it. Where you're going to get to talk to Elizabeth about the piece coming up. Maybe you could just give us a short sort of what to expect and where the inspiration came from for your Arukah Symphony.
Okay. Well, when I was thinking about writing the piece, I was looking at what was happening in 2000, and I thought about this word. I have a very strong interest in Hebrew. Like every Tuesday morning, I have a Hebrew lesson with my teacher, who's an Israeli, but who lives in Argentina. And I'm studying the language so I can read and write some and speak it. So this word, Arukah, is a word which means healing and restoration. So it's in 4 movements, and it takes you from this journey of this affliction that's happening in society, or that was happening, especially in 2020 with the beginning of the pandemic, and then all of the protests and social unrest in the summer. And then you go through this journey from that into this scherzo movement. And then after the scherzo movement, then these kind of this medicine, like healing medicine, which is taken from this text in the book of Revelation when it talks about the leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the nation. And then the last movement, Arukah, goes back to the idea of this kind of these horns and trumpets that are making these strong declarations of this angst that we heard in the beginning. And the memories of that return, but then it eventually dies away. And then there's some parts where it becomes more peaceful, but then looking towards this kind of grand, heroic, kind of celebratory music as the piece and as the symphony ends.
It's exciting and sounds very timely. Talk about healing a nation. Talk about, a wonderful metaphor for us today in multiple ways. And we're really looking forward. You're, of course, going to be here with us for some of the rehearsals and for the performance. I'm afraid we won't be able to have a live audience for this one, just out of concern for making it as safe as possible for our musicians, and also being able to actually do the concert, because we absolutely don't want to be interrupted in our programming again. So we're really looking forward to having you visit, to working with you again, and we thank you for this great piece. There are a couple comments here. One is from our timpanist who's tuning in. She says there's some nice timpani licks in the symphony, and there's a place in, she says, in the Pio Mosso in Bar 120 reminds her of the Percussion Symphony for Band, which many of us who came through good band programs know. I think she's wondering I don't know if you can imagine that spot, but she's asking what you were emulating at that point.
I wonder if she's referring to the first movement.
First movement, Bar 120, yeah. In the
that's interesting about band music, because band music is. I have a band symphony that's being premiered in 2 weeks, and it's at University of North Carolina. So I don't end up writing as much band music. So I'm not actually necessarily thinking about band music necessarily, but I don't know if there was any particular thing I was emulating. That's just a rhythmic idea that I wanted to work in there at that point, because the kind of conversation or dialogue that's happening between that timpani and the woodwinds at that point, the woodwinds and the low brass.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I know they're excited to perform it. It's always fun for musicians to play a piece for the first time, to be the first to create the piece and make it heard. And we're really grateful to be part of this and can't wait to do it. Really enjoyed speaking with you today, learning about your first experience with music from the womb forward, and hope we get to talk some more when you're here. But thank you for joining us today here at the Maryland Symphony Orchestra in the musician studio. As a reminder to everybody who's tuning in, the concert will be live streamed on Sunday, February 13th at 3 p.m. on our MSO Live video streaming platform, which is you can reach at watch.marylandsymphony.org. And it'll be available for 7 days as a replay as well. So we invite you to either tune in for the live stream or catch up with it in the week following. And there'll be some additional content, including Dr. Lee speaking with Elizabeth. So thank you again. Safe travels, and we will see you here at the Maryland Theater in just a week or so.
Good. And just tell if Julie, I don't know if Julie is still there, but I do love timpani. So I love the piece I wrote for Baltimore Symphony just a while ago. The timpanist there, she told me that. I mean, he told me, his name is James also. He told me that I gave him a lot of work, but at least it was rewarding experience. So hopefully, with all the work that we're all putting into it, me and the writing in the orchestra, that we can all have a nice rewarding experience at the end.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie, for your chiming in, and we're looking forward to seeing her too next week. But Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us this wonderful piece, and we can't wait to hear it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for the Musician Studio, and we're going to have another installment. Just stay tuned to our Facebook page, and we will see you the next time around.
All right, thank you.